Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I am Zmore, the dad in DPS, and being midweek, we are back with another episode of The Good, The Scrap, and The Script. Now, before we get into which weapon we are going to use today, thank you very much for the support recently to everybody. It has been, I'd say overwhelming isn't the right word, but it's been, humbling. Really big thank you to everybody. The subs have been going quite well, and the views have been going quite well, so thank you to everybody for the support. Now, with that, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. But yeah, the weapon today we are going into is a one I like to call the Spice and Slice. Now, for anybody that missed the latest episode of my script series, this is a plasma cutter with junkies. 50% reflect melee damage while blocking, which is garbage, and a 90% reduced weight. If I'm honest, it's not exactly the best variation of this weapon. It's not the worst, obviously, but it's not the best. The second effect could have been so much better in multiple ways, but it is what it is. I just really wanted an excuse to test this weapon with an actual decent main effect. But yeah, let's get into the weapon itself. So anybody that isn't familiar with the plasma cutter, it's basically an elemental weapon. So the first essential blade that it gets is its standard one, which comes with some energy damage. Now, by far this is the worst of all four different types of blade. The main reason being that the shocking blade is basically just a better version of the standard blade. So it does say it adds electrical damage. I'm really not sure what the difference between the two is in terms of that. I haven't tested them yet at this point, which we will get into. But essentially, there's no real reason to ever run the standard blade. The shocking blade is by far infinitely better, as you can see, because it is 128 plus on each of the damage stats. So yeah, there's no reason to have it as a standard blade. The next one is the Flaming Blade, which is fire damage instead of the energy damage. And then the final is the Cryo Blade. Now, the fire one is going to add a burning effect to the enemy, so that obviously comes with the benefits of that. It also has the benefit that it will work with the perk Friendly Fire, which means you can use this weapon to heal others and NPCs in the game. So that definitely adds a different kind of spin to this weapon with that. Much like the God, I forget the name of it. The Flaming Sword. Somebody will leave a comment. I can never remember the names of weapons whenever I try and remember them. It'll come to me randomly. And then obviously the Cryo Blade will slow down enemies. Now, this being a melee weapon, that definitely has its benefits, especially since anything in melee range, if it's getting slowed down, it slows down their attack speed and yada yada. If you've ever done daily ops with the freezing mode, it is absolutely awful, so this definitely has a benefit for a melee type. So this is a pretty unique weapon in terms of the one-handed tree. It's the only one that can change its types of damage. There are a couple other weapons that do different elemental types of damage, like your shish kebab, and I'm sure you get a shocking baton, but I forget the name of the actual weapon. So there is a couple of weapons that do have the kind of split damage, but this is the only one that you can pick which type you want, whether it be the plasma damage with the initial type of weapon, or the shocking damage with the current version I'm using, and then obviously there's the fire, then there's the frost. The frost is one I'm the most interested to test, and we'll get onto that in a little bit. But in terms of utility, the weapon, it feels good. It definitely does enough damage to be a viable weapon. And my build isn't optimized towards melee. I don't have the right perks. I don't have the kind of right setup at the moment. But I'm certainly going to get those perks because it's a bloodied, unyielding build that I'm using, which means I am going to get the most optimal amount of damage out of this weapon as I could without those perks, because my strength is pretty damn high. On top of that, you do obviously, when using a junkie's weapon, realistically should be using the drugs effects, because when you use your addictions well, the drugs that your character's addicted to, you can boost your damage significantly, and you're mitigating the downside of having the addictions pretty much completely. So you still get to keep the damage boost. I believe it's about 50% from the weapon, and you get to basically just get free stats and whatnot from it. Obviously, you do have to keep up with a supply of items, but at the same time, it can be quite a significant boost to your damage, or resistance, or depends on what ones you've been using and which ones you're kind of going about. I tend to go for the Psycho buff just for the strength boost and the obvious boost to damage in general. But yeah, it's an interesting weapon. I'm quite pleased to get it. I mean, as you've probably guessed, it's these types of weapons that I have been dying to use and try out because they're so rare and so awkward to get. As you can see, I'm not having much trouble taking out these ghouls. Don't get me wrong, because I'm an unyielding bloodied set, I'm kind of getting my rads up, and that can always be a little bit worrying. But the weapon itself definitely feels good, and it's definitely killing. Now, with most weapons, you do get your perks that boost your damage, and one-handed melee weapons are no different. In the case of them, they have the Gladiator perks, and subsequently the other 2 levels of the Gladiator perk. Now, each one of these will boost your damage of anything up to 20%, so definitely worth getting to boost this weapon's damage. I don't know how it affects the elemental damage on it, but that's something that I will probably make a video on in the future when I do probably a more comprehensive guide on this particular type of weapon once I've managed to get an actual proper build built around it. As you can imagine, it's not something you can plan for because of the RNG involved getting a decent one. Now, the next important perk for melee is Incisor. As you can see on screen, it allows your weapon to ignore anything up to 75% of your enemy's armour. Now, take into consideration that you're doing physical damage, so yeah, ignoring armour is always good when it comes to that. But on top of that, there's also the elemental damage on there. Now, I'm not sure how the numbers apply to that, but there's quite a lot of enemies out there that have very little armour for some of the types of damage this can do. And if you're ignoring 75% of nothing, well, not nothing, but 75% of a low amount, you may as well be ignoring all of it at that point. So if it works that way, that's going to do a lot of extra damage. And then finally in the strength tree, we have Martial Artist. Now, obviously the lower weight on your melee weapons is a great perk, but the main one here is the faster swing speed. If you could be lucky and get one of these plasma cutters with the faster swing speed effect on there, combine it with this, it's going to be moving pretty damn fast, and it's not a slow weapon as is. So definitely a perk I would recommend you pick up if you're using this type of weapon, especially because it is one-handed and it's quite fast already. So more hits, more damage. Now this one's a little bit of a special mention if you're using the flame variant of this weapon. Now obviously, if you have this maxed out, you're going to be able to heal not enemies, allies, and any allies means other players or NPCs that you're protecting during missions. You can heal them using this. So definitely something worthwhile. You can just go up to somebody that's tanking a big enemy and just whack them and heal them. So you have the advantage of being a healer as well as a damage dealer. So just a cheeky little mention for if you're using the flame mod. Now as you can see, I do have quite a decent strength build in terms of this character. It is the heavy build that I've shown a couple other videos. He seems to get really lucky and get all the weapons, or rather have the weapons that are coming out of my Purveyor videos that actually work for him. But yeah, blocker, 45% less damage from your opponent's melee attacks. As you can imagine, as a melee character, that is very important. You'll be taking a crap load of damage otherwise. Then we have martial arts that I went over there. Barbarian, which increases your armor up to about 80. If you've got enough strength points. Being an unyielding build, I definitely have enough strength points. I've just got strong back on there as a little placeholder until I get more perks. 60% damage to glowing enemies using glow sight, so very important kind of perk to have. Perception tree isn't exactly the best when it comes to melee, not really a lot there for them to use. Adamantium skeleton is always good. It basically stops you from getting crippled, and as you can imagine, you don't want to be crippled as a melee character. If you can't swing your weapon fast enough or you can't move around fast enough, you are going to get your ass kicked. Endurance as well is also going to increase your health and damage resistance in general. Fireproof is good if enemies come at you with flamethrowers and things like that. It also stops explosions from doing any real damage to you as well. And Radical is really good because it obviously boosts your strength by an additional 5%. Now in this tree, there's a couple of perks you can put in. For example, if you're using the flame mod, you can always remove certain perks for friendly fire. Tenderizer is going to definitely increase your damage by a significant amount because you're getting that 10% extra damage for 10 seconds after you attack a target, and most targets you aren't going to one-shot, unfortunately, with this particular weapon. Maybe with the spear, but I'm really not too sure about that either. Then we've got Nerd Rage for that extra 20% damage and, you know, the extra damage resist. I've just got Makeshift Warrior in there so my weapon breaks slower. In the Agility Tree, Adrenaline, you gain anything up to 60% extra damage if you're killing enemies quite quickly. So if you're doing ghouls especially, because you can mow through them pretty quickly, you can get a huge chunk of damage. Dodgy, which is going to reduce 30% of incoming damage as long as you've got action points to spend. Evasive, which is basically just the same as Barbarian but for the Agility Tree, and then again, as I said before, I am a bloodied build, so I do have a lot of extra agility points racked up. Serendipity, which is again one of the most important abilities because below 30% health you have a 45% chance to avoid all damage. Then we have Ricochet. Currently I've only got level 2, as you can see I do have a perk point left. I will be upgrading that to level 3, and I believe it's 18% chance to deflect back some of the enemy's range damage, so combine these two together and you kind of dodge a lot of damage. Class Freak to give me my negative effects from mutations to be pretty much 0. Starch Genes to keep my mutations, and Bloody Mess for that extra 15% damage. So as you can see, I'm not optimized. There's a lot of things in this tree that could be removed. So for example, Bear Arms, Bandolier, and Strong Back. Like if I remove 2 of these, I could slot in the Incisor perk and get basically 3 of the well, 1 of each of the Gladiator perks to get an additional 30% extra damage. So definitely something to think about. There's a lot of perks to go around, and yeah, with the new kind of loadout thing, I will be getting perks instead of swapping stuff around, because I don't think I'll need to do it in the near future. So, like any of the weapons we've been using in this series, I'm going to go in and beat up on the Super Mutant Behemoth. Now, unlike the other weapons, I doubt I'm going to do this with the Queen. And the basis for this is that the Queen is very damaging at a melee range, and I doubt it's gonna... What the hell is going on with you? I doubt it's gonna have any real benefit other than seeing me get my ass kicked. Sorry, I'm needing to get him out of the water so I can actually get decent hits on him. Now, the advantage you have against the Behemoth is its attacks are pretty slow, can usually get 2 or 3 hits in on him. And you can see his health is going down pretty damn quickly. It's all just the problem that he does sort of stagger and knock back and all that kind of thing. But in terms of actual damage, this weapon is kicking his ass. It's just a case of, like, melee builds in general do suffer to an extent in comparison to range builds that environment effects like the water, which is a pain in the arse. You have to be close. So if he's sitting in the water, it's going to make me have to pull him out and all that kind of thing. So there's little downsides to these weapons in general. But what we're going to do is, instead of moving on to the next type of enemy, we're going to move on to the next type of damage and see how it has any real effect against the behemoth. So next up we are testing the flame version of this weapon. I'm really not sure how it differs in terms of damage, but we're gonna see. We'll just beat on him before he wakes up. Oh, I think that's doing a lot more. Jesus Christ. Well, that but I did not expect that to do so much more damage in comparison. Holy hell. Well, that goes to say that the flaming one is definitely better on a super mutant behemoth. Holy shit. Now this one's just for consistency's sake, just to see if the damage I did with the flaming one was a fluke last time. But let's see this again. Yeah, Jesus Christ. You do not like fire at all, do you? Oh, big boy, you absolutely hate the fire. 804. Oh, sweet Jesus, this thing turns mutants into mush. Oh, God. And now we move on to the freezing mod. Now, I'm hoping, like, on the heart of hearts, I hope this is the best one, because I really like the idea of the freezing one doing some pretty decent stuff. It's doing as well as the flame mod, at least on the behemoth. 100% doing as well. On top of that, the behemoth didn't get a chance to even hit me because of the freezing effect. So I would say that is a greater success. The flame mode, don't get me wrong, definitely got a slightly higher amount of DPS. I didn't get a crit there, so I didn't, well, a crit or a headshot, I rather should say. So I don't know if this would do the same amount of damage, but that was definitely an impressive test in terms of how quick it takes down at least him. Now, the question to ask is, where does this weapon stand in daily ops? Essentially, it's a case of, like with any weapon, you can do some decent damage. You're able to beat the crap out of most enemies with relative ease, just like you would with the majority of okay melee weapons. You do have the added advantage that the Cryo Blade will slow down enemies, and the Flaming Blade will obviously burn them, so there's that extra damage type that's involved. But in general, it's not gonna get you through daily ops any quicker than most of the daily ops, well, most weapons will in general. As you can see, I am quite confidently beating the crap out of stuff. I'm not having any real issues outside of the usual woes that you go through with melee weapons in general in daily ops, which is getting the enemies to actually come in and attack you, which is always a problem. But it's definitely a weapon that's usable, and the DPS is okay. I am still on an unoptimized build. For some reason, the behemoth takes a huge amount of damage from these in comparison to normal enemies, but at the same time, I'm still doing a decent amount of damage. I'm not in any circumstance that I'd say would this be a weak melee weapon. It is a very strong melee weapon, and some of the two-handed weapons that I've got don't even compare to it, and it's not even being used properly by me at the current moment, especially since I'm not constantly boosted up. And when I am dealing a crap ton of damage. Because I keep forgetting to use the Psycho buff. Ooh. There we go. But yeah, the main kind of problem you're going to suffer with this weapon is getting it. Let's be honest, that is the biggest problem, is getting one of these. You need to go through the whole rigmarole of getting the plans, and then the whole rigmarole of actually getting one with the effect that you want. Now you could technically farm daily ops day in, day out until you get it, but that is going to drive you absolutely insane after a while. So my advice to you is just try your best. If you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. I would much prefer a different variant of this weapon than to the Junkies on a character that is actually designed for melee, but again, beggars can't be choosers. That is so cool an effect when they go invisible and are frozen at the same time. It's like they turn to ice. But yeah, definitely a good weapon, definitely something that's usable in daily ops for sure. As it stands, I don't think when it comes to this weapon it can be beaten by any one-handed weapon in-game currently. It's the only one that gives the sheer variety of utility in terms of the elements that it can deal with and the damage it can deal in comparison with the effects each element specifically has. Obviously, I wouldn't recommend you spend a lot of time trying to get this weapon. It's unfortunately a effort and futility. The RNG in the game is very, very bad, and to get a specific weapon that you have to get to drop for you is very, very, very unlikely. The only way you're going to get this weapon is out of sheer luck, and that is if you can get the plans for it in the first place, which I am still trying to get the plans for this and the spear on my melee character, and it's like pulling teeth out of some sort of toothless monster. It's just, yeah, it's a good weapon, but don't spend your time looking for it, trying to get it. It's not worth the effort. There are other weapons that will do comparable damage, but just not as much and just not as fun. But at the same time, until they make it so that you can craft these damn things, there's no point in you going to the effort of obsessing over getting one. If you have the plan, if you have the time to go and farm the daily ops to constantly try and get one from that, or you have, you know, all the script under the sun, by all means do it. You know, if you want to get this weapon, put your passion into it and whatnot. But it's just not going to be something that you're going to get quickly unless you are super lucky. So, great weapon, poor RNG in the game. So that was today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you do, don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. It helps out the channel infinitely, and we're nearly getting close to pretty much the milestone that I want to reach, which is 1,000 subs. I mean, technically we're only halfway there to an extent, but it's been ramping up really quickly recently, so I am so grateful to everybody that's been supporting the channel, and I cannot thank anybody enough when it comes to that. But we will catch you all next time in the Wasteland.